All right, so we're back, and you know what that means. It's time for another deep dive, and this time, well, we're diving into education.
Oh, yeah, a big one.
Yeah, it's a big one, isn't it? I mean, it's February 13th, 2025,
Mm-hmm.
and Linda McMahon, she's sitting there in front of the Senate Help Committee for her confirmation hearing,
Right.
and she's President Trump's pick for Education Secretary.
Huge.
Huge, but we all remember.
Yeah.
This is the same president who was all about, dismantling the Department of Education, completely.
Yeah, it's a really interesting situation, can someone really lead a department they're expected to, get rid of?
Right. We actually have this ABC News article.
Oh, cool.
It covers the whole hearing, and it really gets into, the tension of that.
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
before we even get into the hearing, the actual hearing, maybe you could remind us.
Sure.
Why does Trump even want to get rid of the Department of Education in the first place?
Yeah, so it really comes down to this idea that, education should be controlled, at the state level, not by the federal government.
Okay.
Trump and a lot of people who agree with him, they see the Department of Education as just this extra layer of, bureaucracy
Mm-hmm.
too far removed from what students and teachers actually need,
Right.
They think states would do a better job because they're closer to their communities.
Okay, so that makes sense. But, even if he wants it gone, can the president just shut down an entire department? Just like that?
Well, not really, no. To actually get rid of a federal department, Congress would have to pass legislation, and
Okay.
that's where things get
Complicated.
I bet.
So let's get back to the confirmation hearing.
Okay.
What kind of reception did McMahon even get?
Well, this ABC News piece, it points out that Democratic senators were, they were pretty vocal about their concerns. They were worried about her qualifications.
Right.
Or lack thereof, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Her background is in professional wrestling and business.
Yeah.
She co-founded and ran, World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE.
Right. Exactly.
Which is, well, it's a far cry from public education.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are kind of scratching their heads over that one,
Yeah.
It's definitely a colorful background.
It is.
But can someone with literally zero experience in public schools, can they really lead the nation's entire education system?
Right. That's the big question.
Yeah.
And, just to add to all the drama, there were, protests going on outside during her opening statement.
Really?
Yeah, people are clearly really passionate about education.
Oh, for sure.
And they're anxious about, what a McMahon-led Department of Education might actually look like,
Yeah.
Especially with Trump's whole agenda kind of looming over everything.
Right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a pretty tense atmosphere.
Oh, yeah.
So what did McMahon even have to say for herself during the hearing?
Well, she actually acknowledged that shutting down the department isn't something she could just, do on her own.
Oh, okay.
And the article quotes her saying, and this is a direct quote, it, quote, clearly cannot be shut down without Congress.
Okay.
So it seems like she gets that there are, legal processes involved.
Yeah.
And it's not just about what the president wants.
Okay, so she's not just planning to, walk in and fire everyone on day one.
Well, not exactly.
Okay.
While she did say there are those legal limitations, she also made it clear that, she agrees with Trump's overall goal of giving states more control over education. So
Yeah.
she's trying to balance things,
Yeah.
Support the president, but also, work within the law.
Right.
You know.
It's a tricky spot to be in, for sure.
Right, yeah.
And then on top of all of that, there's that lawsuit from 2024.
Oh, right, yeah.
With the former WWE employees
Yeah.
accusing her and her husband of covering up sexual abuse.
Right, that's a big part of this whole story, too.
Yeah,
and it raises some, serious concerns about, whether she's even fit to lead.
Right.
Especially because, as education secretary, she would be the one overseeing sexual misconduct investigations in schools and universities.
Oh, wow.
Talk about a potential conflict of interest.
That's not good.
Yeah.
So just to recap, it was 5 former WWE ring crew members. They were teenagers at the time.
Yeah.
And they came forward with allegations of sexual abuse happening within the company. And they're saying that McMahon and her husband basically ignored it all.
That's what they allege, yeah.
Wow, that's a very serious accusation.
It is.
How has McMahon responded to this?
Well, her attorney has just denied the claims outright,
Okay.
They told ABC News that the FBI already investigated these allegations back when they first came out,
Mm-hmm.
and that said they found no reason to do anything, so.
So they're basically saying it's completely made up.
Yeah, they called the lawsuit baseless.
So it's kind of a he said, she said situation then.
Exactly. And regardless of, who's actually telling the truth, it definitely makes this whole nomination even more complex.
Oh, yeah.
It makes you wonder how this is going to affect how the public sees her leadership, you know?
Yeah, it definitely raises questions about, like, her judgment.
Right.
And if people will trust her to handle these kinds of really sensitive issues, within the Department of Education.
Yeah, for sure.
And this is all happening before she's even been confirmed.
I know. It's not the smooth start she was probably hoping for.
Not at all. And we have to remember this is all happening against the backdrop of, her wealth and her close ties to Trump.
Right.
I mean, she donated a lot of money to his campaigns.
Big donor.
Yeah, and she was even co-chair of his presidential transition team.
Huge, yeah.
So even if she gets confirmed, there's going to be a lot of scrutiny around her action.
Oh, yeah.
People are going to be watching to see if she's really acting in the best interests of students or just using this position to, push her own agenda.
Right, and we can't forget about her time leading the Small Business Administration under Trump.
That's right.
Some people see that as like a preview of how she might approach education.
Okay.
Emphasizing things like workforce development and apprenticeship programs.
Right, we'll definitely have to dive into that more.
Yeah.
It seems like, her nomination is about so much more than just her.
Oh, for sure.
It's almost like a tiny little version of this whole national debate
Yeah.
about the role of government, what the future of education should even look like.
Exactly.
And, what kind of society we even want.
Right, and with someone like Trump who, thrives on disrupting things, it's even more unpredictable.
Okay, so we've covered a lot.
We have.
But it feels like we're just getting started.
Oh, yeah.
There's still so much to unpack when it comes to Linda McMahon. Her vision for education and what this all means for students and teachers and, honestly, the whole country.
Absolutely. I mean, we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah.
There's so much more to explore, and I'm really looking forward to diving deeper.
Me too. So you mentioned, her time at the Small Business Administration.
Right.
That was during Trump's first term.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything we can learn from that might give us clues about how she'd handle education?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
If you look back at her time at the SBA, she really pushed for things like deregulation
Okay.
and streamlining access to capital for small businesses.
Okay.
She's very much in line with that, classic Republican view
Right.
that government should get out of the way so businesses can thrive.
That makes sense, but how does that even translate to education?
Right.
I mean, are we talking about less oversight of schools?
Yeah.
More privatization?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But if her past actions are anything to go by, we might see her apply a similar philosophy to education.
Okay.
Think about it. She's a businesswoman.
Right.
At heart.
Uh-huh.
And she's used to operating in a competitive environment. So some people think she might bring that same mindset to the Department of Education, focusing on things like school choice, charter schools, maybe even voucher programs.
That could be a huge shift for public education.
Yeah.
I mean, those ideas have always been pretty controversial, haven't they?
Yeah, they have.
Like some people say they could lead to more inequality in the system.
Right.
With resources, flowing away from traditional public schools and going towards privately run schools.
Yeah.
Or schools that cater to, just specific groups of students.
Exactly. And those are all, valid concerns. Remember those protests we talked about?
Yeah.
A lot of that anxiety is because people are afraid McMahon might try to, dismantle public education as we know it.
Wow.
Some see her as a Trojan horse, coming in to pave the way for a more privatized, market-driven approach to education.
I can see why people would be worried about that.
Yeah.
It makes you think about, who would really benefit from that kind of system?
Right.
Would it really be the students?
Yeah.
Or would it be, corporations and private investors, the ones who stand to make money from these changes?
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond just McMahon herself.
Okay.
It's about this bigger debate we're having as a country.
Right.
About what education is even for,
Yeah, what's the purpose?
Yeah, is it about creating well-rounded citizens,
Mm-hmm.
fostering, critical thinking,
Right.
promoting social mobility?
Yeah.
Or is it about, training a workforce,
Right.
preparing students for specific jobs in the global economy?
I guess it depends on who you ask.
It does, yeah.
And it seems like there's some pretty strong opinions on both sides.
Definitely. And it's interesting to see how those opinions are playing out in the reactions to McMahon's nomination.
Oh, yeah.
Her supporters, they tend to see her business background as a good thing.
Okay.
They think she can bring, efficiency and innovation to a system that they see as, bloated and bureaucratic.
So they're looking for someone to, shake things up a bit.
Exactly. They see her as a disruptor.
Okay.
Someone who's not afraid to, challenge the status quo.
Right.
They think she can cut through the red tape and, bring a fresh perspective to the Department of Education.
Okay. But then on the other hand, you have her critics.
Right.
Who are, terrified of what that disruption might actually look like.
Right. They're worried about cuts to essential programs,
Yeah.
less oversight of schools,
Okay.
and a widening gap between like the haves and the have-nots
Right.
in education.
Yeah, they see her potential appointment as like a threat to the whole foundation of public education.
Exactly. And they're especially worried about what it might mean for, students who are already marginalized,
Right.
underserved by the system.
Yeah, that brings us back to Title I funding,
Right.
which we talked about earlier. This is the program that provides, billions of dollars in federal aid
Yeah.
to schools in low-income communities.
Yeah, it's often a lifeline for these schools, helping them provide those like essential services and support for students who might otherwise,
Fall through the cracks.
Exactly. And it's one of those programs that could be on the chopping block.
Oh, wow.
If the Department of Education gets, dismantled or downsized.
Right.
That's why you see such strong opposition to McMahon's nomination from groups that, advocate for educational equity and social justice.
Makes sense. It's easy to see why they'd be concerned.
Yeah.
But to be fair, it's not like McMahon has said she wants to get rid of Title.
That's true.
In fact, I don't think she's even said what her plan is if she gets confirmed.
You're right. She's been pretty vague about specifics so far.
Right.
And honestly, that's part of what makes this whole thing so unsettling for a lot of people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of uncertainty and anxiety around her nomination because we just don't know what her vision for education is or how she plans to achieve it.
It's kind of like she's a blank slate.
Yeah.
And people are just projecting their own, hopes and fears onto her.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And depending on your perspective, that blank slate could be either terrifying or, full of possibilities.
Right. And to be honest, it's probably a bit of both.
Probably.
A huge moment for education in America.
It is.
And the stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah. The decisions made by the next education secretary, whoever that is, are going to have a ripple effect for years to come.
Absolutely. And this is where you, our listeners, come in.
Right.
It's not enough to just sit back and watch this happen.
Yeah.
You need to be informed, engaged,
yes,
and willing to speak up for what you believe in.
Exactly. So what can our listeners do to, stay informed and make their voices heard on this issue?
That's a great question. Like, what can our listeners actually do to make a difference in this whole education debate?
Well, you know what they say, knowledge is power.
Right.
So first and foremost, stay informed.
Okay.
Read articles from a bunch of different sources. Don't just read the ones that, confirm what you already believe.
Right.
Listen to podcasts like this one.
Oh, thanks.
That really dive deep into like the complicated stuff.
Yeah.
And don't just passively consume information, like think critically about what you're reading and hearing.
Right.
Ask yourself, like, who's saying this and why? What are their biases? What's the evidence?
That's so important.
Yeah.
It's so easy to just get caught in those echo chambers,
Totally.
On social media especially.
Oh, yeah.
And only hear the voices that, like, agree with you. But to really understand an issue like education, you have to expose yourself to different viewpoints.
I do.
And even be willing to, like, challenge your own assumptions.
Yeah, absolutely. And once you've got a good handle on the issues, don't be afraid to get involved. Like, contact your elected officials. Go to school board meetings. Join advocacy groups.
Right.
Even just talk to your friends and family about this stuff.
Yeah.
Education affects us all, so we should all feel empowered to participate.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's so easy to feel overwhelmed by these big problems.
Right.
And just be like, well, what can I even do?
Yeah.
But you're right. Even small actions can make a difference.
They really can. Think about it.
Okay.
Every big policy change, it starts with a conversation.
Yeah.
It starts with people speaking up, sharing their concerns, and demanding better for themselves and their communities.
That's a good point.
So never underestimate the power of your voice and your vote.
It's funny. We started this deep dive talking about Linda McMahon and her confirmation hearing.
Right.
But it feels like we went so much deeper than that.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
We're really talking about, like, the soul of American education.
Yeah, we are.
What it even means, who it serves, what kind of future we want for our kids.
And that's what's so fascinating about this topic. It's not just about politics or policies. Right. It's about our values, our priorities, our vision for society.
It's about who we are.
It really is.
And who we want to be as a nation.
Exactly.
And those are questions that we all need to be thinking about.
We do.
Not just the politicians.
Right.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive,
I
want to leave our listeners with a challenge.
All right, I like it.
Don't let this conversation end here. Keep asking questions.
Yeah.
Keep learning, keep engaging.
Yes.
And keep pushing for the kind of education system that we all deserve.
Well said. This deep dive is just the beginning.
Yeah.
now it's up to all of you out there to keep exploring these ideas and make your voices heard in this really important conversation.
Thanks for joining you.
Thanks, everyone.